Listening Fanfiction presents How They Find Out by Lilac Sky 128, based on the TV series Merlin. Narrated for you by Sierra Steinbecker. Chapter 1. Gawain. It was an ordinary day in Camelot. Arthur had called a meeting, but Arthur was always calling meetings. Merlin was late to it, but Merlin was always late to things, especially when they were called by Arthur. Some would say he did it just to irritate him, but Merlin would deny this vehemently if asked. Gawain was slightly drunk, but Gawain was always slightly drunk. Actually, that wasn't true. There were times when Gawain was a lot drunk. Suffice to say that you would be hard-pressed to find a time when Gawain was not in some way drunk. And so it was on this ordinary day at said meeting, which Merlin was late to, and wherein Gawain was slightly drunk, that Gawain himself was to make a very important discovery. Although he would claim to have known it all along anyway, and perhaps he had. He sat at the round table, which Arthur had dragged from the castle in which they found it, and had it brought to Camelot and placed in the throne room. Some would say that this was a lot of trouble to go through for a table, but Gawain was not one of them. He liked the round table. He especially liked sleeping on the round table. Arthur did not like this, which was precisely why he had to be subtle. So, Arthur was talking about something or other, and Gawain was trying to sleep. Subtly. And in the midst of all this, there was only one word that could have worked Gawain up. Well, two words. One was ill. The other. Magic. Gawain's head shut up at that, and he tried to remember what Arthur had been talking about. Something about Camelot's defenses, he thought. It was at that moment that Merlin burst into the throne room. Gawain grinned. Merlin was his friend, and so he was always glad when he arrived. However, whilst it was true that Merlin was useful in many other ways, Merlin could always be relied on for one thing. He would always be late to wherever Arthur asked him to be. Merlin, you're late, Arthur said. Gawain wondered why Arthur found it necessary to state the obvious, not to mention the inevitable. Other examples include, Gawain, you're drunk. And, Percival, you're awfully quiet. Arthur sighed and asked, more out of formality than anything else, where have you been? Merlin glanced backwards. Gawain wondered why Merlin always seemed hopelessly underprepared with an excuse. Well, you see, never mind, just sit, Arthur said, sparing Merlin from having to make up what would have been, no doubt, a very bad lie. Now Gawain could see the usefulness of Merlin being late. Arthur would have to tell him what had been going on in the meeting, ergo Gawain would hear it again. Merlin took his seat at Arthur's right-hand side. If one was feeling particularly thoughtful, one could think about the connotations of that. However, Gawain rarely found the need to be particularly thoughtful. Merlin and Arthur needed each other, even though they would never admit it. It was as simple as that. Well, Merlin, we've been talking about the laws on magic. Merlin's eyebrows shot up. Have you? Was all he said. Arthur gave him an odd look. Yes. You see, Arthur paused, as though aware that he was about to make a momentous announcement. I have suspected for some time that a sorcerer may, in fact, be helping Camelot. It was a shame, really, that Merlin had not been drinking anything at the time that this was said. If he had, the contents of his mouth would have flown across the table and most likely hit Gaius in the eye. As it was, he merely sputtered with no sound coming out of his mouth until he finally managed to say, and what makes you think that? This was Gawain's first clue. The facts. Merlin generally stuttered when he was nervous about something or lying about something. Conclusion. As that question could not have been a lie, Merlin was nervous about discussing magic. Well, Arthur hesitated. Look, I never told you about this, but when I had to go and get that flower as an antidote to that poison you were foolish enough to drink to save your life, which I then had to risk to save yours, Gawain felt he had to interject. The two could go on bickering for hours. So, basically, you shouldn't try and save each other's lives? Good, now that both of you are sure to ignore that. What were you saying, Arthur? Arthur looked faintly surprised, and Gawain thought that he probably hadn't been sleeping as subtly as he had hoped. Right, yes. Anyway, the point is that there was this light, and well, never mind. But that wasn't the only instance. But, sire, forgive me, but how can you be sure these incidents are the work of sorcery? Gaius asked, giving Merlin a strange look. That was Gawain's second clue. The facts. Gaius hardly ever questioned Arthur unless he had a very good reason or someone was at risk. He had also shot a warning look at Merlin. Conclusion. As Gaius could not have any reason beyond his doubts to question whether these incidents were magical, and this would not be good enough reason for him, someone was in danger. Also, this person was probably Merlin. Gawain leaned forward. And why would a sorcerer help Camelot? That was from Lancelot. Lancelot sounded nervous. The facts. Lancelot never sounded nervous. Conclusion? Lancelot was very nervous. Exactly. It makes no sense. Arthur paused. Forgive me, Your Highness, Gawain said, and Arthur glared at him. He must have picked up on the sarcasm. But, Gawain continued, what actual evidence do you have apart from the magical... Gawain paused and looked around the table. Right. Merlin laughed and Arthur glared at him. Gawain thought that Arthur glared at people a lot. Well, Arthur trailed off before he hit on something. Do you remember that quest, he glanced around, that I went on? Merlin hid his smile. Was that the one you did with no help whatsoever? Arthur turned to Merlin. That's the one, he said through gritted teeth. Merlin looked across the table at Gawain with a falsely innocent look. Well then, how would we remember that? Hang on a second, said Gawain. Was that the one with the wyverns? That one on the bridge? Something about a trident? The Fisher King? Oh, they said together. That quest. Wait, the surly aunt said. Does that mean that you didn't complete the quest on your own? He must have noticed the note of reproach in his own voice, so he added hastily, Sire? Not exactly, said Arthur, looking distinctly uncomfortable. But there were extenuating circumstances, put in Merlin. Arthur shot a bit curious look and then evidently decided to leave it. Yes, anyway, he said, my point is that... Well, do you remember that guy on the bridge? The little guy. Yes, Gawain, that guy. Yep. Well, he said that I was courage. He said that you were what? Merlin's surprise obviously offended Arthur a little. Courage, he repeated, but that I would need strength and magic to complete my quest. He said that I was... Gawain started as the truth dawned. This was Gawain's fourth and final clue. The facts. If Arthur was courage, and he was strength, then the only thing left was magic, and the only person left was Merlin. Conclusion. Merlin had magic. As he stopped speaking, Gawain's eyes snapped to Merlin, who was pointedly and deliberately not looking at him. What's Gawain? Asked Arthur. Said Gawain, still looking at Merlin. Oh, nothing. Merlin looked up at that. Although, Gawain said, still looking at Merlin, there may have been other instances. Remember that fire that broke up our fight? Merlin scratched the back of his neck. And that immortal army that went down a bit too quickly, didn't they? Merlin grimaced. Yes, well, exactly. The question is, who could possibly be doing this? Oh, sire, said Gawain, leaning back and stretching, his eyes still on Merlin. I'm sure I've absolutely no idea. After the meeting broke up, Merlin sped off to do something or other. The boy always seemed to be in a hurry doing chores for Arthur or Gaius or saving the world. You know, that could take up quite a bit of your time. At least Gawain assumed so. Gawain finally got up to him in the corridor outside Gaius' chamber. So, he said loudly, and Merlin turned his expression resigned, if not altogether surprised. Gawain hurried a little to catch up with him as he announced, Magic! Merlin glanced around. Do you want to say it any louder? Uther might not have heard that. Gawain raised his eyebrows. Somehow I don't think Uther's really in a fit state to do anything about it. Really? I heard that you can still burn people at the stake, even if your mental state's been impaired. In fact, Merlin hissed, one might say that you're more likely to do it then. He seemed to manage well enough before. Merlin grimaced. True enough. Why didn't you tell me, Merlin? Gawain asked softly, suddenly, and Merlin looked at him as though he were insane, which was really a debate for another day. Did you not hear the thing about burning people at the stake? And I can see why you didn't want everyone finding out, but me, Merlin? You could have trusted me. Merlin looked at him. I do trust you, Gawain. It's just... with magic, he sighed. Look, I've had it ever since I was born, and ever since I was born, I've had to keep it secret. He shrugged. When it's drilled into you that a slip of the tongue could result in your death, it can kind of become a hard habit to break. Oh. Gawain thought about it. I suppose that makes sense. Who else knows? In Camelot, just Gaius and... Merlin looked at Gawain as if trying to gauge his reaction. Lancelot. Lancelot knows? Well, yeah, it was kind of an accident, actually. I mean, we were trying to kill this griffin, and so I enchanted his lance so that he could do it, and then, well, apparently your lance being engulfed in blue flames is hard to miss. Merlin shrugged a little sheepishly. Who knew? Gawain's mouth was wide open at this point, and his eyes lit up. Merlin had seen this look before. This look did not normally bode well. Gawain? He asked. Come on, he said, slinging an arm around Merlin's shoulders and pulling him down the corridor. Gawain? Yes? Where are we going? Oh, to the tavern, of course. Of course, Merlin muttered. Any particular reason? Well, if you're gonna tell me about every time you've used magic in an awesome way, then we're going to need ale. That could take a really long time. Right, of course. Gawain stopped and looked thoughtful before amending, once of ale.